Chapter 34. Jason. Jason survived. Barely. Later, his friends explained that they hadn't seen him falling from the sky until the last second. There was no time for Frank to turn into an eagle and catch him. No time to formulate a rescue plan. Only Piper's quick thinking and charm speak had saved his life. She yelled, "Wake up!" with so much force that Jason felt like he'd been hit with a defibrillator paddle. With a millisecond to spare, he'd summoned the winds and avoided becoming a floating patch of demigod grease on the surface of the Adriatic. Back on board, he had pulled Leo aside and suggested a course correction. Fortunately, Leo trusted him enough not to ask why. "Weird vacation spot," Leo grinned. "But hey, you're the boss." Now, sitting with his friends in the mess hall, Jason felt so awake. He doubted he would sleep for a week. His hands were jittery. He couldn't stop tapping his feet. He guessed this was how Leo felt all the time, except for Leo had a sense of humor. After what Jason had seen in his dream, he didn't feel much like joking. While they ate lunch, Jason reported on his mid-air vision. His friends were quiet long enough for Coach Hedge to finish a peanut butter and banana sandwich, along with the ceramic plate. The ship creaked as it sailed through the Adriatic, its remaining oars still out of alignment from the giant turtle attack. Every once in a while, Festus the figurehead creaked and squeaked through the speakers, reporting the autopilot status in that weird machine language that only Leo could understand. "A note from Annabeth?" Piper shook her head in amazement. "I don't see how that's possible, but if it is..." "She's alive," Leo said. "Thank the gods and pass the hot sauce." Frank frowned. "What does it mean?" Leo wiped the chip crumbs from his face. "It means pass the hot sauce, Zang. I'm still hungry." Frank slid over a jar of salsa. "I can't believe Lena would try to find us. It's taboo coming to the ancient lands. She'll be stripped of her praetorship." "If she lives," Hazel said, "it's hard enough for us to make it this far with 7 demigods in a warship." "And me!" Coach Hedge belched. "Don't forget me, Cupcake! You got the satyr advantage!" Jason had to smile. Coach Hedge could be pretty ridiculous, but Jason was glad he'd come along. He thought about the satyr he'd seen in his dream, Grover Underwood. He couldn't imagine a satyr being more different from Coach Hedge, but they both seemed brave in their own way. It made Jason wonder about the fauns back at Camp Jupiter, whether they could be like that if the Roman demigods expected more of them. Another thing to add to his list. He hadn't realized that he had one until that moment, but ever since leaving Camp Half-Blood, he'd been thinking of ways to make Camp Jupiter more Greek. He'd grown up at Camp Jupiter. He'd done well there, but he'd always been a little unconventional. He chafed under the rules. He joined the 5th cohort because everyone told him not to. They warned him it was the worst unit, so he thought, fine, I'll make it the best. Once he became praetor, he'd campaigned to rename the Legion the 1st Legion rather than the 12th Legion, to symbolize a new start for Rome. The idea had almost caused a mutiny. New Rome was all about tradition and legacies. The rules didn't change so easily. Jason had learned to live with that, and even rose to the top. But now that he'd seen both camps, he couldn't shake the feeling that Camp Half-Blood might have taught him more about himself. If he survived this war with Gaia and returned to Camp Jupiter as praetor, he could change things for the better, couldn't he? That was his duty. So why did the idea fill him with dread? He felt guilty about leaving Reyna to rule without him, but still, part of him wanted to go back to Camp Half-Blood with Piper and Leo. He guessed that made him a pretty terrible leader. "Jason?" Leo asked. "Argo 2 to Jason! Come in!" He realized his friends were looking at him expectantly. They needed reassurance. Whether or not he made it back to New Rome after the war, Jason had to step up now and act like a praetor. "Yeah, sorry." He touched the groove that Skyron the bandit had cut in his hair. "Crossing the Adriatic's a hard journey, no doubt, but I'd never bet against Reyna. If anyone can make it, she will." Piper circled her spoon through her soup. Jason was still a little nervous about her getting jealous of Reyna, but when she looked up, she gave him a dry smile that seemed more teasing than insecure. "Well, I'd love to see Reyna again," she said, "but how is she supposed to find us?" Frank raised his hand. "Can't you send her an iris message?" "They're not working very well," Coach Hedge put in. "Horrible reception. Every night, I swear, I could kick that rainbow goddess." He faltered. His face turned bright red.